Yeah, I love the mom's line where the kid goes, "Mom, I want to wear my hair like Jesus." And she goes, "When you start to act like Jesus, you can wear your hair like Jesus."
We are Saints in the South, your source for gospel growth and good times. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Saints in the South. We have a bonus episode today, bringing on a couple of guests. One you are familiar with, Charlie Moore. He's been with us a few times in the past, so good to have you back, Charlie.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And got a new face with us, Tim Roberts. First time. Good to have you.
Thank you, Jackson.
Absolutely. So today's topic of discussion is pertaining to our youth, and we're going to tackle this in a couple of different ways. First way, as it pertains to our parenting in the home, and second way, as it pertains to youth in the church and leadership in the church and things like that. So both of you have grown children that are out on their own now, married, served missions and so forth, married in the temple, but you also have youth that are still in the home. So you're still heavily involved in raising your children. Me personally, I don't have any children outside of the home yet. So I'd like to start out by asking you first, has your parenting, or how has it evolved over the years as you've had children grow up to adulthood and are now outside of the home? Has there been any evolution? What kind of things have you changed? What have you seen that has worked and maybe not worked, and so forth? So
I'll start off, I guess.
Okay.
I have my daughter's married. She's 24 in Charlotte. I have a returned missionary son. He's 22 out in Lehigh, Utah. He's a pilot. And then our daughter, Julianne, she's in Roseville. And then I have 17-year-old twins at home. And I've always loved talks, Jackson, like listening to them. It's kind of my two hobbies are talks and my wife. And my wife said she wished I listened to more talks. But I had these three talks that I kind of think back to when I needed them as a father and how they helped me. I was married in 95, and then I became Young Men's president as we were pregnant with our first. And one of them was living worthy of the girl you will one day marry. And that's a talk that President Hinckley gave about the girl of your dreams, and she'll want to be married to this type of man, and how she pretty much hitches her wagon to your wagon. And you kind of largely determine the outcome of her future, and how you do this together. And she'll want to be involved, and she'll want to see a husband that is centered on the Lord and wants to contribute to the church, and how we could help lift them up in their role as a wife and as a mother. And so that talk helped me out a lot. And then as we were coming up on our birth of our son, there was one called "Dad, Are You Awake?" That was a Hammond talk in 2002. And that's where he goes on a hike with his son, and it just really was a sweet talk where he talked about his son saying, "Dad, are you awake?" And he said, "I love you a million trillion times," and then went on to say, "I just laid there in the night thinking about the blessing of having this little boy." And then he talked to us as dads and said, "Are you awake when it comes to love and to discipline?" And anyway, it kind of gave me an outline of a good dad. And I knew it was a good talk when President Hinckley concluded and said, "We might as well close conference after that talk by Brother Hammond." And that was a powerful talk. And so the last talk, I would say, would help most of the youth and the parents that are listening to this talk. It's called Courageous Parenting. And so we were at a juncture with our 11-year-old who was asking if she could sleep over with friends. And she's turning 12. And because we grew up in a small town, kind of a lot smaller than here, I guess it'd be more like Blackshear, but we had enough places for all the kids to go off every Friday night and every Saturday night, which had been great for free babysitting and to have time with just Amy and I. I would have loved that because I traveled a lot and I could have used the break, but we really didn't know Holland's close friend that asked her to spend the night. So I definitely didn't know her father or the uncles. And so we were a little nervous. We went to an LDS prom, and Chris Lowry, which you guys may know, brought up the fact that there was a talk on courageous parenting about sleepovers. And I said, "What?" And I had listened to conference, but I didn't really pay attention to that talk. And I had to go back and read it. And it was talking about sleepovers common in society today. The first time kids get introduced to porn or sexual activity, or even with the police, and how when they're away from our house and their defenses are down, it's a little harder. And so we shouldn't maybe do those things. And so it was a talk that really, Amy and I sat down and we said, are we going to do this? Because if we do this, we do it down to our last kid. We do it to the twins, which are like 3. They're innocent and they're not going over to parties. But I said, it's going to be hard on us if we do this for all of our upcoming weekends, the rest of the time we have kids at home. And she said, let's do it. And I would say that made a lot of difference in our kids' lives, is the focus on we can do a late night. We'll have you home, but you're going to be underneath our influence. And he talks about Eli and the ark and his 2 sons, and he tells that story just briefly. But he also talks about seeing your daughter on the railroad tracks and how you would just run to her to tell her there's an oncoming train and not worry if you were being offensive to the daughter. And we need more courageous parenting. So I would say those 3 are like sentinel talks in my life as far as listening, because honestly, I think parents, there's a difference between love and parenting. Like we could go to any T-ball game on a Friday afternoon and there's plenty of love there. Right. All the grandparents are there. They love their kids. The dads love their kids. You can tell there's love. You go to first graders assembly at school, there's a lot of love in the room. Parenting, those are 2 different things. You know, I have a friend in high school who had a really nice truck. He had really nice paint job and had really nice stereo system. It was always clean. He didn't change the oil for 100,000 miles. And so it eventually just died as a truck, although it looked good on the outside. And so I think parenting is because we have our kids, we think, are you telling me I don't love my kid because you're saying I'm not a very good parent? No, these are totally mutually exclusive things. I know that you love your kid. Parenting, we go to just seminars for our jobs and we learn and we grow, and parenting, we're just like, we'll see what happens.
Right.
And I don't think that's right. I think the kids need to be under somebody that's willing to learn and realize they don't know it all. I don't think we have to do feasibility studies and look years down the road. We can learn today as a parent and go, how did that work out for them? Or who could I emulate? Like there were times in my life, Jackson, where I would scold my kid and I go, there's no way Gordon B. Hinckley handled it like that. Like there's no way. And so I think we can emulate parenting in a good way and have to realize we don't know it all, and be submissive to the Spirit and know each kid is different. And a disclaimer is all kids are born different. Right. And they come with agency, and I don't want to take away from that. But then we just try harder or change our methods, because you can't just say this is the parenting plan for the Roberts kids, because one may have a different route to go, and one we may need to do different things for. And so I think that's important too, to look at your family as a whole, and it's kind of like chess moves. This is going to be this and this. And I use my older kids to finish your question. Now, like when we take Holland and Landon to their EFYs and to church things, and we would take all the kids so they could hear the excitement and build off of it. And now that Holland's gone on a mission and Landon's gone on a mission and Julianne's on a mission, I enlist them to talk with the twins about the good things about their mission. And so it kind of is like a family farm, right? Like that's why with the Smiths, you all have brothers that are out there plowing. We're doing the same thing with the family and going, let's help those behind. The twins need help getting through high school. The twins need help navigating. Now it's not just me and Amy, it's Holland, Landon, Julianne trying to help the family. And I think that's important too.
That's good.
Would your older kids say that your young ones have it easy?
Yeah. But, part of it is...
Just wondering if that...
It's a true, Charlie. But, part of it, and this is true for anybody, pretty much every trip starts off, we can go on the trip and eat peanut butter and jelly, or there's no trip at all. And so now that we can go out and eat while we have the twins, it looks like everything's kind of easier for them. Right. But it's hard to hard parent. Like, I'm tired all the time. And you would think it's just when you have newborn babies and they're crying or whatever, but to parent hard and not be a hovering parent, because you could literally be at church and try and do everything right and almost be sergeant-like, and we will, and da-da-da. Amy's always done a good job at saying, look, I've already set my life's course. This is the reason that you need to do something. And so I I do feel like they do look back now and make fun, but they know they have a vested interest in their younger brothers being part of that family too, right? If a Heavenly Father's going to lose a third of his, I want to beat all the odds.
Right.
I don't want collateral damage. There's not a kid in my family where I go, whatever, if you don't make it. There was a guy that came and spoke in Lake City one time, and he said that he went to family prayer with the family, and they sat in a circle, and he said they all prayed for each other. And he said Satan didn't have a prayer in that family, which I took two ways. Satan basically would have a hard time getting into that family unit, but also they didn't mention Satan's name. Satan didn't have a name in that family prayer. And I think that we need to do that more as a family unit. As for me and my house, this is what we're going to do. And I tell my kids all the time, you're a guinea pig, and we'll see if it works. But I want you to understand the whys and the hows and what I'm even thinking. I don't send them off and say, because I said so. I say, this is why, and this is what we're thinking, and here's the reasons. And so they're kind of in on the family plan instead of just going, my dad's a jerk,
right.
Anyway, which kids can do. I'm just talking to talk. Charlie, go ahead.
No, I mean, a lot of the stuff you said I can relate to. As you were talking at the end, I just thought about they're saying physicians or surgeons practice medicine. And they don't say they have perfected medicine, though they're held to a little higher standards because, you mess the transmission up and the transmission's bad, you just throw it in the scrap heap, and you can't do that with people. And so it's kind of the same with parenting is that I think it is important for your kids to know that we're doing our best and we're practicing. Yeah, we have resources. The church helps out a lot. The scriptures, friends and family and grandparents, hopefully, will help make a difference and helping your kids along. But many times when we're having a heated discussion with my kids and they want to do something and we're saying, nah, we're not going to do that, I always try to ask them, what do you think our motive is? Do you think we're trying to make it difficult for you? Do you think we're trying to say, hey, maybe we can make her life miserable or not hang out with her friends? Or do you think our intent's good? And I do think it's important that we remind them kind of that we're trying our best. As it pertains to the question you asked, I think something I'm trying differently from my older girls. So we got our situation's a little bit more compact, I guess, in that we've got twin girls and then we got triplet girls. And so of that, I feel like we have 5 kids, but 2 shots at it. So with the twins being out off at school, I look at them now. They're married. Both of them are married and think they've made great choices with their husbands. Jessica says I beat myself up, but recently I look at them and what's important to them, and they're driven. Both of the girls are very driven. They've always made great grades, great decisions. They're both at BYU. They both married in the temple, returned missionaries. But as a parent, I look back now and think that maybe I spent too much time telling them that I wanted them to be good citizens and that I wanted them to I did teach service and stuff, but I'm trying differently now to do a little more testimony building than probably I did with my older girls. Now, granted, they're at BYU, they're at a church school, they're doing good things, but as a parent, I'm telling you, I wish, and I'm trying to do a little differently and looking for opportunities with the younger ones that are still at home, 11th graders in high school, that I can look for opportunities to kind of have gospel applications in day-to-day life stuff. I want them to see the Lord's hand in lots of things, and maybe I didn't do as good of a job with my older girls, though they're great girls. I mean, I'm saying that like they're terrible kids that are spending time in the state pen, but they're good kids. That's what I would change.
So let me ask you this: what did you see? Where did that come from as far as maybe changing the focus a little bit and maybe trying to put a little more emphasis?
So okay, because they're at BYU. In my mind, the advantage of BYU is a few things. One is you're surrounded with other LDS kids for the most part. There'll be a few that obviously athletes or whatever, they're there that may not be LDS, but so they're surrounded with other kids of their faith. They're at a school that has standards or moral codes that you got to live by, and you have to take a religion course every semester. Those are kind of constants that are requirements for the school. On top of that, you've got weekly family home evenings that they do on singles ward. Every Tuesday they have a devotional where one of the general authorities or apostle or one of the brethren will be speaking there. There's lots of opportunities to do stuff that are kind of outside what you have to do, and I feel like my girls do not do a lot of that. They don't take advantage of many of those opportunities at school. And so I told Jess the other day, I told my wife, I said, it's like any other university if you don't do that stuff. And she goes, well, that's not true. And then she started kind of telling me, they're around other LDS kids. They have a prayer before every class that they go to. So there are differences, and I was kind of being negative about it, but that's what kind of got my thoughts thinking, maybe I should have done a little more testimony building and a little less, good grades, make sure you have a job, be involved in your community, and more of, I'm glad I did that stuff,
right.
But I wish I would have probably added a little more in of gospel-oriented type stuff, of testimony building type stuff. And so I'm trying to do little things now to change that behavior from me as a parent to the triplets.
I see where you're coming from, because I guess as we're sitting here talking, what I'm thinking is that if you teach the gospel, and the gospel is all about, obviously a foundation, testimony in Christ, right, and trying to become who Heavenly Father, who Christ wants us to become, and so if they've got that testimony in Christ and the gospel, then maybe those other things, achieving, being a good citizen, right, having strong financial goals or career aspirations, strong family, those things may naturally fit in,
right.
Whereas the other way around, if you focus just on career aspirations and don't really focus on the gospel, that testimony in Christ doesn't have to be there,
right,
and may not naturally fit in to life, whereas the other way around, I think it does, maybe a little more. Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like listening to your podcast a few weeks ago, and Michael Packard said that I don't know if it was on his mission, I think it was a huge group of missionaries at Zone Conference, something one of the general authorities said, as it pertains to getting a wife, would you rather have, right. How many of you by show of hands want a wife with just a rocking testimony? Or no, he said, would you rather have a wife with a rocking testimony or just a drop dead gorgeous wife? Well, of course, you're a missionary, so all the hands say whatever. And so the general authority said, elders. A gorgeous wife can always gain a testimony.
Right.
So I guess the point to your point is, I think if you teach correct gospel principles, that some of that stuff just comes naturally.
Right.
I mean, you read the book Mormonizing America, and it talks about that. It talks about how the church spits out these incredible business people, because from the time they are 8 years old, they're in primary giving talks, standing up in front of crowds. They're very early at an age of 12. They're in presidencies and having meetings and
right.
board meetings, if you will. So when you enter corporate America as a 20-year-old kid, you've been to lots of board meetings. You've been public speaking for years. You've been put in uncomfortable situations. So even outside of the gospel standard of living how Christ would have us live, from an organizational standpoint, you're kind of taught that. So to your point, I think it's a wise point to teach correct principles and help them build their testimony, and that other stuff's kind of a good side effect.
That's a Boyd K. Packer, right?
Right.
About teaching
correct.
the doctrine.
That's right.
And the behavior will follow.
Yep.
Tim mentioned manuals, and one of the things that I've joked about before is that that's one thing that our Heavenly Father has left out in this great test that we have here, is pertaining to specifically parenting, is when that child is born. I think we should have a manual for that child to come with it, because every child is different, and it's amazing how your children being raised by the same two parents up under the same home with the same principles and beliefs and everything can be so different. And figuring out how to react, but because you can't react and implement the same exact things for every single child, because it doesn't work. They react differently, to parenting styles and so forth.
I mean, Tim can attest to it. You've got identical twins with the same DNA that's raised at the same time period. I mean, because you can say, Jackson was raised by the same parents, but it was 10 years apart from your older sibling or whatever. And so times were different. Cell phones came out, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, you're talking about identical twins that are raised in the same house at the same time, in the same grade, and are totally different. I mean, absolutely they're individuals you're raising.
Yeah. I think that's why we have stories, though, about Lehi, Nephi, Sam,
Absolutely.
Laman. And so you can look at it and go, if Truman Madsen once somebody said to him, if no success outside the home can compensate for failure in the home, like a David O. McKay quote, Joseph Smith was a failure. None of his family goes to Nauvoo leaves Nauvoo. No, like nobody wants to leave the place where Joseph Smith's killed in Carthage. And so you look at the Smith family as a whole, and Joseph once said, I believe the Lord will take care of my family. Now, we can't just let the second coming be our retirement plan, and we can't just say, well, once it gets to heaven, it'll all get straightened out. I think it makes you fight harder and go, what can we learn from the Laman and Lemuel, and what can we learn from Nephi and Sam, and how that works as a family unit. And a lot of times I have to go into a 17-year-old's head. Like my dad cried for a year and a half before I left on a mission. I was his only son, did stuff with him all the time. I had 3 sisters, and I grew up in the church. I went to seminary. I only had a little bit of class in scouting. It was first class, but I went to seminary and I did everything church. If the church was open and there was an activity, I was there. I got to the MTC, had never read the Book of Mormon, and I go, the Lamanites are the last people? Like literally, I've read it 80 times plus, but I have to go into the heads of the younger kids and go, even though Charlie goes, I should give them more of a testimony. The fact is, if you're leading by that example, their kids know that the temple's important to Charlie and Jessica. And we've always looked at trips and go, look, we'll go to New York City, but let's swing by the temple and let you do some baptisms in Palmyra. Or we'll start in Oakland, California at the temple and in the trip in San Diego. Now, we've done a lot of fun stuff between it, but if church is on Sunday, we're going to go. Now we're on the road. We're going to have to eat at In-N-Out Burger because we have no food with us. But it's not because we're like, let's break the Sabbath. It's because we have to eat. And so our kids have never been like, man, this church is a drag. I think that they look at it and can see the benefit of a worldwide church, of a chance to serve a mission. They think of coming up on a mission's fun, but a lot of it has been how we've phrased it their whole lives. So where do you want to go on your mission? I've never once said, do you think you'd go?
Right.
Would that be something you'd want to do? Where would you like to go? And then the siblings also talk to them. And I think I've even did that as a young men's leader. We'd have those conversations with those youth that are on the periphery, and you have to kind of encourage them and like, it's fun. And you can see all the good things that come from church. And so I think it's actually the talk that was given recently with Sister Holland and Elder Holland. I'm not sure if you heard it, but she said, we wear our religion like a headache. And we do, sometimes she goes, that crown's already been worn, by Christ. And we're sitting here like, woe is me. And it's so hard. We need to learn the juxtapose of a family. Like, we can have fun, but we also can serve the Lord. And yes, Sawyer wants to wear his hair a little bit longer than I had my mullet back in the 80s or whatever. So what? I mean, yeah, I love the mom's line where the kid goes, Mom, I want to wear my hair like Jesus. And she goes, when you start to act like Jesus, you can wear your hair like Jesus. And so, I think sometimes we do that even as adults. Look at that kid. He's not wearing socks or whatever. We shouldn't be that way. Right. We should be a little bit more like times are changing and how they're doing it is it, what's Jeffrey R. Holland's line? No clean haircut can compensate for failure of the soul. So they may look the part, just like my friend's truck. It may be like, man, that looks great. But inside it's seeping oil and having all these issues. And so I think that as a parent, I have to go, my 19-year-old self, when my dad's sitting there boohooing for a year and a half. I thought, why are you crying? This is fun. I'm excited. And I get to go to California. When I got my call, I was like, this is amazing. And so I have to go back and forth. And Amy has to go, hey, Tim. And that's what's nice about having spouses, that you can bounce that idea off of and go, hey, what do you think? And you're getting a little too strict here. Why don't you, and have those conversations. But even I had a single mother in Lake City. She had 5 kids. And they all did amazing. And she would come to me as the young men's president and say, hey, I think my son needs this. Can you help with this? And she's very good at moving parts, and because she cared and she was all in. I think that's the worst thing a parent could do, is just go, it's too exhausting. Yeah. Because you watch those kindergarten through 4th grade assemblies, the grandparents are there, the aunts, uncles, and moms and dads. By the time it makes it to 8th grade, high school, they're like, what do I do with this? It's all over. Not that they don't love them. But it's just parenting gets tough, right?
So the conversation that I've had with my children, that my wife and I have had, is that we've had that friend versus parenting conversation. You've heard parents aren't there to be your friend, right? And I've told them, and that sounds harsh. I'm not your friend. What I've explained is that it's actually a greater bond. It's greater than being your dad. Being your mom is a greater relationship, a greater bond, greater responsibility than just being your friend. I am your friend, but I'm so much more than that. If I'm letting you do these things, if I'm letting you go spend the night at somebody's house who I have no idea who those people are, then I'm not being a parent. I'm not looking out for your best interest, and helping them understand that can be difficult.
Well, you think about that primary song. Your job is lead them, guide them, walk beside them. They don't need somebody else to play PlayStation with them. That's not your job. And so while you can do fun things as a dad and take them fishing and play PlayStation,
right,
they need advice. They need life, like, how do I navigate this? And you can't just read them a poem or look at footprints in the sand. Jesus will be there with you. They have to understand this is why you shouldn't go with that girl to that party. And this is and be directive and be blunt. They don't need religion whispered in their ears. They need it straight, undiluted. Just hit them in the head with it and go, this is why. This is what's going to happen. And so I do feel like, what's your quote? If they don't hate you by your time, what'd you tell me?
That's good. That's from Dobson and The Strong-Willed Child. He says, if your kids like you before the age of 21, you're probably doing something wrong.
It's good.
Absolutely. One more topic of the discussion. A concept that I've had in my mind for a while is, because you hear about successful people that grow up to be highly successful. They've grown through some very hard times. It seems like those that have been going through hard times as a child, a lot of them end up being very successful because they've just gone through hard tests, right? So the concept of manufactured hard times versus organic hard times. Whenever you have a home, 2-parent home, gospel-centered, a lot of that hardship is they don't get to experience. So figuring out how to implement some challenging times for them versus them having to just experience it on their own, being out on the street, living on their own at 14 or whatever it is. Kind of developing character. How do y'all try and implement toughness in any way with your children? Does that make sense?
Sure. I had in our small town, they were wanting to phosphate mine, and that was the plan. And there was some family on the let's mine phosphate on this issue, and I got in the paper because I stood up and said, look, we don't have to do a 25-year feasibility study. Just go to White Springs, buy Live Oak. There's no malls. There's no shopping centers. All this tax revenue they talk about, there's none of it. The springs dried up. There's no hotels, no place to eat. Ask them if they do it again. And I kind of feel like I've always parented like that. Like, you do not have to touch the stove. Go ask the guy with the burn-off hand if you should touch that stove. And I think Dallin H. Oaks' talk in, like, 97, it was about the therefore what talk, where he talks about he wrote a paper, and at the end the guy goes, therefore what? Is he talked about our lack of work can be just as bad as our work right now. And I do think the idle mind's the devil's workshop or whatever. I do think there needs to be work involved in a kid's life so they can understand tithing and money and taxes and all those things, and to keep them busy. If we just give them everything they want, it doesn't necessarily, the parent that went through all that and then says, here's a free ride, doesn't duplicate what helped him become a man. And so I think you look at examples like that and go, what can I learn from that? Going on in that talk, he says, is it really any different, those wolves that surrounded our kids back then, than pornographers today? And those that, so you really are fighting still some of the same battles, they just look differently. And you kind of have to think, how do I navigate this part of their life with them? Because you have sports and you have church and you have friends and you have all these things. Friends are, Thomas S. Monson said something like, friends have far more influence than people give them credit for. Like what parents' advice is like neck and neck. And so I think early on you have to also help them. Here's how to choose a good friend. Here's what to look for. And while we shouldn't be judgmental, you have to judge a righteous judgment. And you have to say, look, kid, this kid's heading this way. The parents are this way. And kind of help steer them. Because, to manufacture drama is kind of tough. But I do think you could take that work and help out with like that service project Charlie's lined up with the homes, and we're going to do service. Let's go do our neighbors. But, I think they should mow the yard.
Oh, yeah.
I think they should have jobs or come up with ways to make money. And so I can't just watch childhood go by without the benefits of having their own pocket money and paying for things themselves. And so I paid for EFY for them to go to Palmyra this summer, but they wanted to go on a ski trip. It's like $600 with their friends at another church, which I was totally fine with. And I said, if you earn it, and they did. And so I think that it's tough because you want to give your kid everything. That's just the dad in us, right? We're like, gosh, I would give you the moon, but that doesn't make for the best kid. We weren't given everything, right. And we had to work through it, and we had to grow, and we had to change. And I think that's part of life's journey, and that's how you get those calloused hands, and that's how you get a heart that's full of service, is to kind of navigate it that way and help them along the way. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, similar. I think that I do think that I've actually got a book that I'm going to write. I've got the title to it ready. I just haven't written anything yet.
It's missing the guts.
It's just missing it's just a cover. It's a front and back cover. And
I'm going to be doing the illustrations if you guys want to come see this book.
But the title is "The Struggle Is No Longer Real," because I really think that there is an absence of struggling with youth today, inside and outside the church. I'm just saying youth, period. I think to your point in asking about the subject, I do think that not only success as it pertains to financial success, but gaining a testimony, building an exercise routine or a robust body that you want to have or whatever, all that takes struggle. All that takes real effort and sweat and tears and setting up at night, twiddling your thumbs, thinking, what am I going to do to make this work? And I think our youth like that a little bit today. And I think it's not, I don't think they are trying to find the path of least resistance necessarily. I think some of it's us. I think some of it's the parenting of what Tim was saying. I did struggle a little bit coming up as a kid and financially, wanting a pair of Nike tennis shoes. So my parents couldn't afford it. And so either I had to go work in the farms in the summers to save up and pay for those, or either I wore, generic
Winner's
shoes
choice from Sears. Yeah.
Or either I wore the Velcro strap shoes. And so because I wanted that and I scratched and clawed and got that, I didn't see that at this time as being, hey, this is going to build character one day. I didn't see it that way, but I do believe that every time our kids, want the Hey Dude shoes or want whatever the latest, fill in the blank, whatever the fashion is, and they get it, and they never have to want for anything.
Right.
I think there is an eternal principle there of learning to work hard for something and not just be, we just today we're in church talking about the upcoming youth activities and how we're fundraising and everything, and our bishop said, I want them to have some skin in the game. I don't want the ward to say, here's your money to go to that event. And I think it makes them a little different to struggle to get that rather than just having this. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, you called it manufactured struggling, but like Tim was saying, putting your kids in situations where they have to work for it, or you don't just hand it to them. I heard years ago in a talk, one of the, I don't remember who said it, if it was a stake meeting or whatever, but anyway, the comment that was said was, we should learn to say no sometimes when we can afford to say yes. When we can pay for our kids, whatever they're going to do, a ski trip or $600 ski trip or whatever, we need to learn to say no only because we know it's for their benefit. And we know that to make that good running back, he has to spend time doing power cleans and building some core strength rather than he was a fast kid in college. We're going to put him out there among the greats and let him. I think we have to manufacture some trials or obstacles. I'm not saying throw your kids in the lion's den and say, figure it out. But I do think that we are hurting this generation by handing everything to them on a silver platter and saying, here's your new iPhone. You just turned 16 and, whatever. I mean, so.
Well, you have those parents, too, coming up and fighting every battle for you. Oh, the teacher said what?
Right.
Principal said what?
Yep.
And so they need to be yelled at by a boss.
Yep.
Agreed.
They need to be coming home and going, I can't believe that happened at work. And that we have that conversation. Here's how you overcome it. We had many with my daughter who's on a mission now. Like, I accidentally stepped on this girl's flip-flop. Now she's scheduling me weird. How do you overcome that conflict? How do you, and so things happen as you put them out there in the world and teach them. These are things are real, and your mom won't be there to fight your battles. You don't all get trophies at the end of the game. This isn't how life is, and that there's those ups and downs. And I think like what Charlie was talking about with the manufactured, you look back at your kids and just go, I want them to have the best. And if I'm just a dad that gives them everything, I think about Joseph Smith with the gold. I mean, like literally, he's told right off, this is not yours. And I bought a lottery ticket before my mission, my buddy and I, who served a mission as well. And that's all I thought about that week. We're going to be so rich. And I know the church doesn't want tithing from it, but surely we're
thank
good
goodness
boys.
I get all of it.
Right.
Oh my gosh. That's all I could think about. And I could see where Joseph Smith, you're handed 60 pounds of gold. You think, what a generous Heavenly Father. When this is over, all of this, I'm getting this gold. And because his family's in dire straits, he's never had anything. You can imagine 60 pounds of gold going, this is mine. And that's all you would concentrate on. You wouldn't think about the work. You wouldn't think about all those hardships that you go through because it would just be handed to you. And so I think there's something to learn there that if you just go, here, kid, because I didn't have it, you can have it. No, there's growth in the struggle. There's strength in the struggle. And that's what, that's what stretch marks are on a mom. There's work to be done to have that beautiful baby. It doesn't just happen. There's things that have to happen before that. And I think that's what's beautiful about life. But we take that away just because I don't think that makes for a better kid.
I think just the greatest maybe requirement is we have to be intentional about how we're parenting. It has to be intentional. You mentioned, once they get 14, 15 years old, you just kind of throw your hands up and I say, all right, they are who they are and just, whatever. You get tired, but being intentional, I think, is a big part of that, and being successful in raising children. Let's for the last little bit, let's transition into outside of the home and how we still we have callings as young men advisors or on the high council or seminary teachers. There's many different areas where we have or you're just a caring member of the ward, and want youth to succeed.
I would point out I'm actually an executive in the church.
That is true. That's true. I forgot. We're in royalty. Where is this crown?
That's
Did you
right.
leave that off?
Exactly. Yep. Charlie, you're in the bishopric.
I'm in stake young men's.
You're in the stake young men's, right, on the high council.
Yeah.
And I'm a seminary teacher. So we find ourselves, we have youth that are involved in the ward, and so we find ourselves, and we will for many years, and have for many years. How do we, if we see parents who maybe aren't succeeding in the way that we think quote unquote, we think that they should be succeeding, where, as far as encouraging your youth, their youth to their children to serve missions, to attend the Sunday meetings, the Wednesday meetings, going on these great summer trips. How do we step in? How do we have an influence there? Is there a way to do that successfully?
We had a conversation one time with this young woman who was not heading in the right direction in our ward, and so we had a fireside at this member's house and brought up this issue. And the young women's president, he's like, I'm not saying nothing. And everybody kind of was like, what do you say, or whatever. Right. And a lot of times you hear that, pick your battles. And then I'm seeing they're losing the whole flipping war. Like, you can't just push all these battles to the side.
Yeah, if you lose all the battles, you're going to lose the war.
Absolutely. Right. I don't want to fight them on wardrobe. I don't want to fight them on curfew. I don't want to fight them on the word whiz. Whatever it is, like you said, at the end of the day, you've lost. And so they said, I don't want to say anything. And I said, I'll say something to her. And I said prayers. And it just so happened we passed each other in the gym on a mutual night where I'm not in the room alone with her, and I don't care who comes by and hears. But I said multiple prayers and just said, I can help her. And I just
this is a young
youth, yeah.
Okay.
And I was young men's president.
Okay.
And as we pass each other, it's in the gym. I mean, literally, they're playing basketball behind our heads. I just said, hey, I've just been worried about you. I know you've been hanging out with this group of friends. Are you happy with the way your life's headed? And she goes, no, not really. And then we had a real sweet heart to heart. And I think we need to not rely on ourselves and listen to the Spirit. Like, how can I help with my talents and gifts and things that I've been given? Because sometimes I'm not blessed with sports talents or musical talents or whatever, but I love the youth because I was one. And I wish maybe I was a little more coached up, or people believed in me more. And so I think if I can get in their heads and be able to understand how to say, look, this is going to be a lot of fun. And I think one of my young men's presidents said it best to me, who became my bishop, then my next door neighbor, and then he was one of my counselors in young men's. John came into the youth, and the youth were sitting there and said, listen, guys, we have youth conference coming up. He goes, you will never, ever, ever remember why you went to work on those 2 days that you missed youth conference. He said, you'll never remember what you spent the money on. You won't remember conversations that you had. These 4 or 5 that you get to go on to will be with you the rest of your life. These 4 or 5 trips that you get a chance to do in these summers, that's it. And it just stuck with me because it hit me like a ton of bricks. That's the truth. And so I try all that I can to say, let's just get them there. Let's get that kid there to that experience, and then the experience change the kid so that they're pushing their parents for family prayer. They're doing like that because, let's face it, you can't do a whole lot about a hard-headed jerk of a dad that's sitting there in his recliner pulling down the L for loser. You can't. But you're dealing with a youth that can basically go, how can I do better? Somebody believes in me? I mean, think about that. Heck, you were happy when older boys knew your name back when you were in the youth. Some parent or some adult leader wants enough to talk to me. And so that's a benefit. I wouldn't look at it as like a scary thing. I would say, how can I go on this camp out and tell some funny stories about my mission or whatever, and have some dialogue about those kinds of things and pray about it. And the answers come. They do.
I was just thinking back in the must have been late 1990s. Stephen D. Nadal was in. I don't know if he was in the General Young Men's presidency or if he was in the area presidency, but I remember him giving a training and talking about the church constantly doing statistics, looking at statistics for everything, for teenage pregnancy, for not just among the youth, but just church membership, of what's helping, what's not. And one of the things that they were looking at was how youth are influenced by their parents. And I don't remember the exact age, but I do remember that the girls were about 2 years gap from the young men from the young women. And so, forgive me, whoever's listening to this, and you can go back and kind of get the real numbers. But the point of it was, when youth get a certain age, and it was the girls were, I want to say 16 and boys were maybe 14, that they lose mom and dad as their hero. They're no longer who they look to say, man, I bet my dad would know this. And it says, interestingly enough, that after about a 4-year gap, 3 or 4 year gap, that the parent became the hero again, but that there was a window that they were no longer the hero. And so the point to Elder Nadal's teaching was, you better hope that that young man or young woman has a young men's president, young women's president, a bishop, a good, some good friends in the youth program, counselors at school, aunts and uncles or grandparents that they kind of cling to, that give them good advice so that they don't burn too many bridges and make too many major permanent mistakes, so that when they come back in 3 or 4 years and mom and dad are their hero again, that they haven't strayed too far from the path. So I think, to your point, I think it's easy. I heard someone once say, I was so much better of a parent before I had kids. And so it's easy for me to look at Jackson Howell's parenting, and I'm like, what is he thinking? Is he really letting Brody do this? It's easy for me to judge from the outside looking in, not knowing the dynamics of that family, or not knowing that he's struggling with something, or that Brody's wanting to do X, Y, and Z, and Dad's saying, "Oh, heck no, you're not. But I will consent and let you try this." So I think, and I'm not saying as a youth leader, don't you dare say anything to parents or youth. I think what Tim says is right. I think you've got to pray about it. You got to be led by the Spirit. And by George, when you do feel prompted to do something, don't be afraid to do it. Ask or say or go or text Jackson and say, "Hey man, Brody was on my mind. Anything I can do to help out?" I think it's super important to act when prompted. And I think there's sometimes a window that if you don't act, that's past. And that the Lord answers Jackson's prayers through Charlie's and Tim's and Elders Quorum presence and stuff many times, that we're the eyes and ears and hands of the Lord on earth. So I do think that we, as leaders of the church, I think we have to be praying for these kids. I mean, we hear it all the time when you're teaching lessons. They say, "Don't prepare Saturday night, knucklehead. Prepare ahead of time. Pray, ask the Lord what He wants you to have your class members know, and then when it comes up in class, talk about it. Let them run with it. Unless it's some wild tangent about motorcycle racing or something. If it's something pertaining even vaguely to the lesson, then let them run with that." So I do think that as leaders, we have to. The Lord knows them way better than we do. The Lord knows them better than they know themselves. So I think it's important that we involve His help with the youth.
I think as a parent, when what Charlie was just talking about, I've seen it from both sides. Hey, I saw that your daughter, somebody saw her drinking, and it becomes, oh my gosh, they hug me, they put my arms around, I'm going to fix that this tonight. Thank you so much for telling me. Or shoot the messenger. Where did you hear that? Blah, blah, blah. And I think we as parents can be better receivers of maybe our kids aren't perfect, and that we can sit back and go, because it's a teachable moment as a parent. And I can't remember if it's Sister Hinckley, but she said, "I will never say that my kids wouldn't do that, because they may be out in the foyer doing it right now." And I think we have to have that kind of not just the mama bear comes out in us. We have to basically sit back and go, gosh, maybe where there's smoke, there's fire even. Right. Thank you for letting me know. But I feel like so many parents put up that wall of tell me who said, and I'm going to trace it back to that and pound that kid. Right. I don't think that's right. I think that we should be more receptive to, gosh, they see something maybe that I didn't. You know how your friends can critique you maybe the way you wouldn't, and your wife sometimes don't say that, Jackson, you shouldn't have. And it's the same way with me and my wife. And I think as parents, we've always said, if somebody comes to us and said, your kid was telling some bad jokes or drinking a beer or whatever, that we could go, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Hug them and just let's fix the problem as a family. Because I think it takes a lot of courage for the guy to go up and say, rumor has it that your kid, blah, 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 to a parent. And that's out of love. It's not like I could have just kept that rumor to myself. I want to help this situation. What can I do to help? So,
yeah, I think opening that line, being that individual who's open to building on that relationship with the youth. and helping them out. Charlie was a big, he was a return missionary as I was kind of getting ready to go on my mission. And
this is in the Paleoic era?
That's right, exactly. Okay. Yep. No, so personally, I've known Charlie a lot longer than I've known you, Tim. So Charlie's always been really, really good at being interested in the other person, right? And building that relationship. And that's not an easy thing to do. You just shared an example of where there was somebody there that was struggling, and you took the initiative, following the Spirit, to show interest in somebody else. And as a seminary teacher, that's what I'm personally trying to do, showing interest in the youth. And it's an interesting thought or statistic that you mentioned about there's about a 4 or 5 year period there where the youth kind of say, Mom and Dad don't really know anything. And if we can be those available individuals, I think that will go a long, long way.
I don't know if anybody's out there going to listen to this part, but I think there should be more prayer behind the seminary teacher. We have young men's every other week. You got mutual or young men's activities, if it comes or if it happens at all, where the bishop has some time with the youth. But the seminary teacher can get them 5 days a week for all that time. And I think that's such a pivotal time, even if the bishop were to show up and show some love, or the young men's president on occasion, or not the young men's advisors, or anybody just show up and just, I'm supportive. I can get up this early and I can add to the class or whatever. I think that you could show up with breakfast one morning and have a good conversation with them. Or today we're going to talk with him about these particular scriptures we've talked about. And I just feel like the seminary teacher is such a pivotal role right now that all the time they get to spend with our youth is more than any other calling, honestly. And I don't think people think about it. It's kind of just like, who will get up? And it's like that period before school when you have a captive audience. Gosh, it's amazing, to be able to influence them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of youth, we're getting ready to head to a youth devotional. We're about out of time. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I love the youth. I mean, I think that, the church, keeps saying we need to be in good hands, and we need to, Brad Wilcox, I think, said it best. We're raising kids in a sewer. And I want to thank any mom or dad that's trying. I just think we could do better. I think there's a Harvard president that said basically the start of learning is to be humble and know that you don't know everything. Yeah. We look at a president of the United States and go, he should know everything. How could he be commander-in-chief if he's never been in the military? How can he We're looking at these youth basically, and we would love to give them all lobotomies, right? Like if we all listened to our dads, we'd have a ton of money in savings, no cavities. Things would have just gone perfect in our lives because we listened to the fathers before us. But we can put our arms around these kids and say, look, in times like this, here's what I learned. Here's what helped me. Because we're still dealing with the same type of issues. David looking at Bathsheba is no different than porn on a phone. We still have those same problems. We just got to change them. And they got to understand and adapt the scriptures to them. How does this story about Nephi and his issue with Laban help you? Or Laman, or any of the other stories? How does it relate to you? Because the 2,000 stripling warriors, while that sounds good, who knows what their future was? Did they all stay with the church? Did they all? Who knows? It ends pretty quickly, right? 2060, they all are around, and that's about all we hear about them. As dads, as anything, you have to continue to push these youth and go, let's make a nice life here. If you were to look at your Facebook 10 years from now, do you want to be in prison? Do you want to have a wife? Do you want to have, what would it look like? Let's help get you there. And because we've gone that way before them, we could say, come this way and let me help you. And I think a loving bishop, get them to the bishop if they are having some sin problems. He's not going to tattle. He's not going to tell his wife. Let's help you move along the repentance path. Let's get you a clean conscience. Missions are great. Anything we can do to help put our arms around them. And it takes a village, but it takes a village of good people. I mean, you could have a village of potheads, right? Trying to come at your kid. You have to have people that care and enlist those. I mean, that I could go, Charlie, would you go talk with Sawyer? He's having an issue about whatever. I think we should do that with each other.
Yeah, I think, and I think there is there's a village of every kind out there, and they are coming after I mean, Satan wants
100%.
He wants, so that's why we have to be active and intentional in our parenting and influence. Charlie, anything?
No, not much. I mean, just what Tim said. I love the youth. I mean, I really, sincerely, I love my own kids. I've grown up watching your kids be born and raised, and I love getting on the ground and playing with one of my other callings right now is I work with the Activity Day
That's right.
boys. And I'm telling you, every other week is so much fun because they're just vibrant little miniature adults that are trying to just make little decisions and see life how it is. And it's just, I don't know. So it almost angers me at thinking anyone that wants to hurt the little ones, whether it's Satan or scumbags in the media or whatever. So I hope in an effort to save the youth, which is what we're talking about, that I can play some kind of little part, either as a dad or a church leader or a friend or something to lift them up. I hope not many youth walk by us at school or at a church activity or at church where we don't, pop them in the back of the head or speak to them or let them know that they're loved. I mean, that, we kind of poo-poo their stress level. Yeah, they're stressed about Fortnite not being able to get the next level or whatever. But the truth is that stress is stress.
Right.
And so stress to me is making sure that I can provide for my family or that the car is going to make it from point A to point B if I'm out of town or whatever. So I hope we don't always minimize their
what they're going
their
through.
trials
That's
in
right,
life.
yeah.
That's right.
That's right.
Their trials are different than what all of us were, what we thought was hard growing up. So I hope we love them, put our arm around them, and say, you know what, things are going to be all right. Anything we can do to help. Courage missions. I don't know. I mean, you could give a litany of things that we could be encouraging them for. But I hope they don't walk by very often where adults don't acknowledge them and tell them you love them.
Very good. Well, thank you both for coming on, Charlie and Tim, and maybe we can do this again sometime. So I appreciate y'all's input.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Until,
Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely. Until next time, y'all keep on striving.